This week, we have the fullest of moons as we have the full moon in Taurus, but exactly on Uranus, which is going to make this week kind of a little bit electric, kind of a little bit crazy. As well, this week, we have Venus moving into Capricorn. We are going to be having Mercury make a square to Saturn, which is going to be kind of the universe is going to tell you essentially to shut up. We have Saturn stationing direct, and of course, we have the Sun going opposite Uranus. And at the end of this week, we will have Mercury going opposite Jupiter. So let's go ahead and get started talking about it. So welcome back to the Astrology Report. My name is Cam White. If you don't know me already, this week we are talking about November 11th through November 17th of 2024. So I'm recording this on Friday, November 8th. You guys are watching this on Sunday, probably, but on Sunday was at November 9th, 10th. I'm going to do a live stream of my thoughts on the election, what I got wrong. I got a lot wrong, and I'm really pissed off about it because I've been saying Trump was going to win like this whole year, and then like Kamala came in and I was like, and I went back and forth. I was like, let's fuck it. Let's go Kamala because of the chart thing. So I'm going to talk about that. You're watching this on Sunday. This video that I'm talking about will probably have already happened, so we'll go ahead and check it out if you want my thoughts about that. But let's go ahead and start talking about this week. So we start Monday off on the 11th with the moon in Pisces making a sextile to Uranus first, and then it's going to be making a conjunction to Neptune. So the moon in Pisces, it's a little bit of a sleepy week, or I should say a little bit of a sleepy Monday, feeling a little bit sensitive. The moon doesn't go into Aries until Tuesday, so the moon is just kind of like in a very weird dream state for Monday for the most part. But Venus enters Capricorn on Monday. I cannot think of another word. This is the thing that's been stuck in my head is Venus in Capricorn is serving cunt, pretty much. I've been thinking of like, what is the male version of serving cunt? And I've kind of come to the conclusion that it's like serving cock. Like, it's got to be cock. It can't be dick. It can't be, you could say Richard, but it's serving cock. There's something about Venus in Capricorn that is serving cunt. And I mean that in a very specific way. If Venus is about, number one, Venus is about like rules over women and stuff like that, right? But Venus is fun and pleasure and connection. When she's in Capricorn, there's a lot more of a wanting to do things in a very traditional way, wanting to do things in a very structured, disciplined way. And what I mean by that is Venus in Sagittarius is a little bit more wild, a little bit more rambunctious, versus Venus in Capricorn has her shit together a little bit more. She's a little bit more put together. She's a little bit more business. And that doesn't mean she's not having fun. That just means she has that essence and that aura. And so I really like, Venus in Capricorn is literally one of my favorite transits of like all time. And so I'm really excited for Venus to just move into Capricorn this week. But I think the vibe really goes from a little bit less of the chaotic Sagittarius, Leo energy that we've got going on into a little bit more of kind of getting our shit together energy as we start this week. So then we get into Tuesday, and on Tuesday, the moon is going to ingress into Aries. It's going to immediately trine Mars, and then it's going to be conjoining the North Node throughout the day. Plus, we have our first highlight of the day, and that's going to be Mercury making a square to Saturn. And then later on throughout the afternoon, the moon will be making a trine to Mercury. Okay, I like the moon in Aries once Venus goes into Capricorn, because once the moon goes into Aries, it will make a square to Venus in Capricorn first. I totally forgot to write that. I should have written that down. But the moon in Aries is just feeling like rambunctious, a little bit more lit up as it trines Mars in Leo. Mars is in Leo. The confidence, the pride, the ambition, all of that's all there. And it's conjoining the North Node. It might be going a little bit too hard in the paint, a little bit too intense on the note of intensity. On Tuesday, you're going to be feeling the intensity, putting your emotions and like just doing a lot of hard work. But with that, Mercury makes a square to Saturn. And a lot of this is like being told to shut up, essentially. And it's not like have you ever been in a moment where you weren't paying attention to what was going on around you and you're just talking, and like everyone else was really quiet because they were paying attention and they had to be like, hey, shut the fuck up for a second. Be quiet. That's kind of the energy on on Tuesday with Mercury squaring Saturn. But the only other thing that I would talk about with that is, this is something I've been thinking about, is like, if Mercury's in the superior position to Saturn here, is this maybe Mercury, like I've been saying a lot about like the beginning of 2025 and even this time of the year is like being a little bit more delusional in a good way. And I've been thinking about Mercury in Sagittarius squaring Saturn from the superior position is like, if Mercury is about rationality and like logic and it's in detriment, it's in Sagittarius. It's like, it's just thinking of bigger things. Is this thought process of being a little bit more hopeful, seeing a little bit more of a bigger picture, helping us not be as rigid with Saturn and Pisces? Like, I don't know. I just keep looking at Mercury squaring Saturn. Is this like a moment where we kind of go like, oh, why am I limiting myself this way? Like, why am I putting myself in a box this way? Like, it's so funny how oftentimes in life we could just like create these invisible structures that imprison us to do certain things. And then it's like someone can come along and just point it out. And you're like, why am I doing it that way? Like, I'm not getting anything out of this. I've created this, prison system that I don't have to be in. And I just wonder how much Mercury squaring Saturn is that. Like, on one level, it is like a shut up. It is like a being told no. It is on one level, like not being able to go where you want to go, not being able to go as fast as you want to go. But on another level, it's kind of like, I wonder if there's something that we think about that makes us think different. Like, there's something that makes us think about our situation differently, to where we could see a little bit of what options that we have, what better options that we have. Now, we do have the moon in Aries, though, trining Mercury, and I wrote this down as yapping/yelling, and that's why one of the titles I have for this week that I don't know if I'm going to choose or not was the yappening. Like, there's a lot of yapping going on this week. There's a lot of chatter going on this week, and I think what's important about that is understanding, like, talk is talk. Like, this is the big thing too. Like, I'm going to talk about this in my live stream. Like, you need to understand when it comes to politics. There is what politicians say that they will do. There is what they can actually do. And then there's what they will do. And understanding that is really, really big. And I feel like really everyone's caught up in thinking that every time a politician says that they're going to do something, that's exactly what they're going to do. And it's going to be exactly that way. It's not how it works. It's not ever how it works. So Mercury and Sag this week, it's going to be a lot of talk. And that's fine. Let them talk. Let's see what the actions are a little bit later on down the road. And so then we get to Wednesday, and on Wednesday the moon will still be in Aries, and it's going to be making a sextile to Jupiter for the most part, for the most of the day. I think this is a lot of excited energy. I think this is like kind of just thinking of all the scenarios, thinking of like where else can we go. Again, a little bit more chatter too. But then the moon makes a square to Pluto at the end of the day, and this is really late on Wednesday night, where I put like, "Are you afraid?" And I look at the moon in Aries squaring Pluto in Capricorn as like, okay, you have this ambitious energy to do something, but it's squaring Pluto and Capricorn. The system is not always like on your side. The way in which you have to do that, like you will be having to navigate a system that is inherently corrupt, that is inherently not in favor of you. And are you going to let that stop you? Like, I find it really, I find it fascinating to see how much people allow fear at the end of the day to stop them, because at the end of the day, you have a feeling, and that's fear. And then what we do is we then associate what that fear is. We say like, oh, I'm scared to do it. And so it's not actually I'm scared to do it. It's this thing is stopping me, or that thing is stopping me, or this thing is inhibiting my ability to move forward with this. And that's not really true. It's just that you're scared and that you're projecting that fear onto a physical thing that you're allowing as an excuse to stop you. And that could be valid, but if you can't complain about not doing anything or not going anywhere if you're just going to be scared. And I look at the moon in Aries squaring Pluto and Capricorn. These are at like 29 degrees, right? Like, again, how much longer are we going to do this fear stuff? How much longer are we going to let fear get in the way of what we want to do and where we want to go? Because this is not something that inhibits me that much, because I obsess over the idea of like, if I'm 80 years old and I don't at least try to do the things I want to do, I'm going to be miserable and I'm going to regret it. That's all I think about. And so I don't have that problem. But I think that's the framework that helps me the most, is like, well, I'm going to die at some point, and I'm going to get old, and I'm going to have a lot of time to think about what I did and did not do. And that is much more terrifying, in my opinion, than jumping in the pool, essentially. And so then we get to Thursday, and on Thursday, the moon is going to ingress into Taurus. I love that. The moon will, Thursday's a really good day. It's almost a perfect day for an election for astrology. But the moon goes into Taurus, and then the moon squares Mars and trines Venus at the exact same time, and then the moon sextiles Saturn. Thursday's moon transit, I fucking hate. I love it and I hate it. Speaking of fucking, because I just cussed, there was a guy that wrote down everyone's predictions for the election, and on my thing he wrote what I said, and then it was like, caution, this astrologer curses a lot in his videos. And it's so funny to me. But the moon goes into Taurus and then squares Mars and trines Venus. What's so weird is the moon going into Taurus is a sense of calming down. I always think of the moon in Aries as like, okay, let's say you go to work at like 9 a.m. That 9 to 11 a.m. you're on the caffeine high. You're like on the energy drink, caffeine, cigarette, whatever it is. And then, you kind of get a little anxious. And then the moon goes into Taurus, where it's like you have like some like nourishment. You have some substance. You have something that like grounds you a little bit. That's like the moon in Taurus. But then the moon, again, squares Mars and trines Venus, where this is like a yes and a no at the exact same time. It is a no first, because the moon makes a square to Mars first. And the no is essentially like, no, you're not going to, it's like being like, no, you're not in the mood to fight. no, you're not in the mood to disrupt everything. Like the moon's in Taurus where it's grounded, it's stable, and then Mars is in Leo where it like wants to show off and wants to put off a fight. That's where the no energy is coming from. And then the moon shining Venus, though, is a little bit more of like, yes, to having fun, to making connections, to feeling more grounded, to, again, like bringing pleasure and receptiveness to the earth sign stuff, to stability, to structure and things like that. So there's a little bit of like Thursday where it's like you want to kind of still be a little bit ambitious, but the moon in Taurus squaring Mars and Leo is like, no, you're feeling calm. Like let's feel a little bit more grounded. Let's get a little bit more, in our bodies, and let's do stuff around that in that way. And then of course the moon sextile Saturn, which I think just emphasizes this whole feeling grounded kind of energy. And so then we get to Friday, and on Friday we have just two highlights, and that's the full moon in Taurus on top of Uranus, and Saturn stationing direct. The full moon in Taurus on Uranus is I don't know what to think of it, because I keep thinking about over the past couple years. I really think about when the North Node and the South Node were in Taurus and Scorpio, and just we had eclipses on Uranus, and that was all kind of crazy. I think for a lot of people there will be some level of upheaval. A full moon is just essentially highlighting an axis. And I think the big thing is look at the Taurus Scorpio axis for you in your chart. Does it rule your 10th and your 4th house? Does it rule your 11th and your 5th house? Does it rule your 2nd and your 8th house? Look at those houses, because that's where you're going to get kind of like it reminds me of the note I wrote down is like, I'm a huge Seinfeld fan. And it reminds me of like when Kramer just kind of busts through the door. That's kind of the energy of this full moon. But it's going to be a little bit more focused on disruption. The ruler of this full moon is Venus. Venus is in Capricorn. She's zodiacally making a trine to this. Mars, the ruler of Scorpio, is in Leo before it goes into shadow. They're not really squaring. You could say they're quincunxing. That's such a dumb aspect in my opinion. But anyway, there is a little bit of a disruption here, but I almost look at this as kind of like a snapping out of it. Like, have you ever been daydreaming or being lazy, and then you look at the time, you're like, shit, I got something to do and I got to go and do it. That's what this reminds me of, is like we're kind of in this weird haze, not really thinking about anything. And then all of a sudden the full moon in Uranus where it just kind of like shakes us awake and we have stuff to do. The other part of this is Saturn stations direct at this point. And what I like about Saturn stationing direct is since June, I think it was about June when Saturn stationed retrograde. And then what was it? Let me actually look at the chart real quick. It was about, when was Saturn at 12 degrees the last time? That would have been, at about March. So about March of this year. What's been going on for you? What house does Pisces rule for you? And Saturn, since March, has been moving into new territory where it's been establishing, again, new responsibilities, new things you have to kind of take care of, new ways to be mature, new limitations, seeing where the boundaries are. And as Saturn went forward between March and June, it introduced all of this. Between June and now, it's been like, okay, how do we get used to this? Getting used to this. Now that Saturn's direct, it's like, all right, we're feeling a little bit more able to handle what is ours to do, what we are responsible over. And Saturn moves out of shadow, I believe, again in February, if I'm not mistaken. Let me actually go back to that, because the next part is Saturn will move out of shadow around February. Yeah, it'll be February. And then Saturn will move into Aries and we'll have all that stuff. So pretty much between now and February is kind of like, we're going back over the stuff that we've learned again. And again, this is like whatever house Pisces rules. This is about friendships for you, because Pisces rules your 11th house. Is this about, 7th house stuff, relationships for you? Saturn is saying like, hey, here's where your limitations are. Here's your responsibilities. Here's where you need to be patient. And you've learned that since like March through like June. And then from June to now has been like getting used to that. And now it's like, again, the analogy I've always used for the Saturn retrograde phase is like Saturn moving into a new part of a zodiac sign is starting a new job. Like you're getting on the spot training. Here's the boundaries. Here's what you're responsible over. Saturn going retrograde and going back over that same part of the sky is like your first week or two without training. Like you're still getting used to the job, but now you just don't have anyone to help you. And then Saturn station direct and moving forward over that shadow part again is like, okay, you've been working here for a little while. You're used to it. You understand what's going on. And now we're comfortable with it. That's the whole idea. So this is really good. I like Saturn station direct. And I like it too, combining it with the full moon in Taurus on top of Uranus, where there's this like kind of snapping out of it and being able to just go immediately to work, knowing exactly what's ours to do. Again, it's ruled by Venus in Capricorn. I really like where she's at right now. She's going to help bring Pluto into Aquarius as well. And then that brings us into Saturday, where the moon then ingresses into Gemini and is just sextiling Mars. And then the other highlight we have on Saturday is the sun going opposite Uranus. The moon going into Gemini and sextiling Mars is very like just yapping. Again, there's a lot of yapping energy. There's a lot of high caffeine, low food in your stomach, a lot of anxiety. Saturday would be an interesting night to stay up all night. The sun going opposite Uranus is also very electric. A lot of breakthrough energy is available for you here. And this is what I find really interesting is like this week is kind of like weird. And then it's like the full moon on top of Uranus where it's like, bam, wake up. We've got shit to do. Where have you been the whole time? Like you've just been kind of daydreaming and, out of the zone for a minute. And now we got to get back in. That's kind of the vibe here. And I think that really gets emphasized on Saturday with the moon in Gemini, sextiling Mars. There's a lot more communication. There's a lot more action. Sun going opposite Uranus. It's really, again, electric. It's kind of more of a breakthrough, like genuinely snapping out of it. So Saturday looks pretty nice. And so then we get to Sunday. And on Sunday, the moon will first go opposite Mercury and then it will conjoin Jupiter. And then the moon makes a square to Neptune. And then we have our highlight for the day, which is Mercury going opposite Jupiter. There's a lot to talk about here. I love Mercury opposite Jupiter, but the moon in Gemini going opposite Mercury, then conjoining Jupiter is, again, a lot of talking, a lot of chatting, a lot of ideas. Again, enough, take a shot every time I make a drug analogy, but this is like, we're having an 8-ball, we're having a good time. It's just talk. It's just too much though. There's too many ideas. There's too much moving forward with stuff. Because then the moon makes a square to Neptune, where it's just all over the place. We're a little bit confused. We've had a little bit too much to drink, a little bit too much up our nose, too many nose beers. But we also have Mercury opposite Jupiter. And I really want to talk about this highlight because Mercury's in detriment, Jupiter's in detriment, and they are opposing one another in each other's signs. This is a weird moment where, again, this reminds me of the scene, Parker, you'll put this in, of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Charlie and Mac see each other from across the bar, or that meme from Zoolander, where Zoolander and Hansel look at each other. That's what's going on here. It's this weird energy where they're seeing one another. I would argue this is probably more of like the It's Always Sunny scene where they're like, you're not supposed to be here, or what are you doing here? What I would also say is that this Sunday allows us to kind of see issues that what have been the issues with Jupiter in Gemini, and what have been the issues with Mercury and Sagittarius. This is allowing us to see that a little bit more clearer and a little bit more deeper, and we will have an opportunity to address these issues as Mercury goes retrograde over this. But I think the solution really is you have to really get out of your mind. This is not, again, we're going to be pushed next spring into genuinely being delusional. Just be like, you know what, fuck it, we're going to do this. You know what, fuck it, we're going to do that. You know what, fuck it, we're just going to not think about it. We're going to jump into the pool. And that's going to be hard to do. But this is going to be kind of a good tee up for that. So I'm really looking forward to Sunday, although Sunday is just, I think our mind's going to be a little bit everywhere. I think you're going to be questioning everything, confused about everything, overwhelmed with everything on Sunday. But I think that's good. I would just say, rather than being overwhelmed in this area, be overwhelmed like this. Just let your mind explore. Something I really love doing is you think you only have so many options, but then play with a different option. What are you the most scared of? Rather than being oh, I can only do X, Y, Z. Well, what about this other thing? Could you do this other thing? What would your life look like if you did this other thing that you never would have thought, or that you think is not an option for you? Play as if it is an option. Think bigger, play a bigger game. And that brings us to next week, where next week we have the sun trining Neptune, we have Pluto ingressing into Aquarius, and the sun going into Sagittarius, and that's about it. This is kind of a quiet time until Mercury goes retrograde and Mars goes retrograde. So with that being said, I love and appreciate you guys, and I'll be seeing you next week.